was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was a fly with a buzz and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can remember.
Um, this is Jeremy. Just came back from Europe for the AoS Worlds event. I'm on my sixth cup of coffee as I'm trying to defeat jet lag, and also, resume some state of normalcy after what would be, I would consider, a pretty high emotional weekend for everybody, really, not just the team itself, but the entire AOS community. I hope everybody followed online, especially your own respective teams, and watch the stream on AoS Wargamer, which was fantastically well covered. I got to see some clips on the some of the games when I was flying back to the States. Just you're like, you just can't quit. Once you're in that, it's such a magical event that when you're in there and you're watching all this live, it's just like, it's just like it's like a drug, basically. Like, you're going through withdrawals almost instantaneously at the end, after it all. Um, Photo behind me is the last game we played, after the aftermath of the last game we played against Germany, and it was a fairly very good photo, I think, in the fact that no one looks sad in this photo. So, and everybody's tired and done, right? And I think that's kind of like the state of the event at any point. It's the most competitive event of AOS that can be on the planet. And I don't mean that like in the sense that like all the other events which are big for singles are not competitive, but I don't mean competitive in the sense of like you have to win the games and basically get to the podium. And what I mean by competitive, it's truly like a skill expression that off the table, on the table. There's a level of complexity and pairings and strategy involved in this format that just doesn't really exist very um, doesn't exist a lot anywhere, especially when you get to 8 players. I know team events traditionally, or the ones we have, are more to 5, which is more acceptable considering the community size and so forth. But 8, it throws the combination of pairings and armies played, like it can go for a loop, right? Or it can make it basically exponential. So planning, that's it. And the more teams that participate, because we had 26 teams versus last year of 24, and then the year before I think it was even like 18, I think, or something. So the event's been growing every year, and that's good. Uh, well, it's amazing. I don't know what good is not the right term I would use for it. I got to use a more of a superlative for it. Uh, and it's just that, yeah, it's a lot of work. Like, so I'll start with like the way I wanted to, before I go too far by rambling and so forth. I wanted to talk a little bit about and I think I've done this last year as well, if I remember correctly, but for a different, not for my own channel. What is AOS Worlds? Why do people go? Why do they do it? And what kind of player does it attract? And also, for the most part, I'll look back at this year's event, what worked, what didn't, and um, you know, what did what's for next year? What are we planning for next year? Right. So let's start with the first the caveat. Like I already mentioned, it's probably the largest competitive event, or the most competitive event, not largest competitive event of the world for AOS. And once again, not because it's single GTs or not. It's just the complexity and the way the format works. It's just truly way more like, just there's so much more to it than just actually playing the game. Um, for context, for those who don't know what the event is, this year and last year it was an 8-player for basically team event with across 26 nations, and each nation at the play. We were in Amsterdam this year, like we were last year. I don't know where we'll be next year for, because it's a bidding process. Firstly, to each countries will in the next 2 weeks or a month will make bids, and then captains will vote for, yeah, and for them, and then we'll see where we land up next year. Maybe United States, that'd be great. So anyway, so for the most part, the event itself is 8 players, 8 game, so 8 games being played each round. Each round has well, 4 missions, and this year, which I've really liked, is it's round 1 is these 4 set missions, and then round 3 it's the same set of missions as round 1, but inverse in order. And what that does is it affects what is the most important part of the team format, is the pairing strategy of the event, right? When both teams will know which mission is coming up in the stack in the first round, at the beginning of the round, they will both assign a defender, a protector, whatever you want to call it, just the first player that basically will play this mission. Like, you're guaranteed that player will play this mission. Don't know against what yet, but you have an idea of what you can face, because you're the other team. You know exactly what the other teams are bringing, so it's just a question of like, what do you think they're gonna do, and like, so you're playing this mental game, and like, about what are they gonna do early, what are they gonna do later, right? There's this element as like, so they put the protectors down, they reveal them simultaneously, so each team sees now what the protector or defender army is, and they know who's gonna play it, and they know what the mission is. So now they're gonna assign. They're both captains are going, or both teams are going to pick 2 attackers to attack this protector / defender. Once both teams have decided whether these 2, and this is all face down, they don't really know. Once those decisions are made face down, both captains will then reveal, and they'll take both cards, and then as a collective team, or as the administrative part of the coaching staff of the team, they will decide which of these attackers will attack their defender. So now you get a choice again, a little bit of agency about controlling what that your player you're just basically put out there will play against. Once they pick, they put it face down next to the protector, and they put the card they do not want to play, they're not playing against, face down on the other side, right, away from the decision. Once that's basically been chosen by both captains, they flip it, reveal, and now you know what your attacker is playing into, on what mission, and blah blah blah. So now you've got 6 cards left, right? You have 8 players, 8 cards, now 6 cards. Next mission, same process, rinse, repeat. The only one that gets weird or different is at the last mission. Basically, whoever, because you'll go into the last round with 3 cards, right? 3 cards. Yeah, whoever doesn't get picked as an attacker becomes defender, if I remember correctly, or whatever. It's a little bit different because there's less cards at the bottom. But for the most part, there's a strategy around like trying to trap certain armies, because at some point you can put, like, let's say like your opponent plays a magic, Lumineth or magic heavy army, and you, in your stack of options, you have 2 armies that are really like bad, really good against that, like maybe Khorne and Lumineth, or I don't know, like something that just is, it's a great combination. But being agnostic of the mission right now, you could attack with those 2, and then your opponent is forced to take one of those options. They're going to consider, like, what mission is it? So they're going to want to basically necessarily pick the card that's the attacker that maybe is worse in that mission, or they might even take the attacker that is, the worst possible outcome, because that attacker is also good into something else later in the round. So, or what other options you have, or even better on some missions later in the stack. So there's like this whole strategy about making sure you are pairing, correctly to minimize as much basically risk and maximize as much opportunity. And the teams that do this well will get into this state of which they'll get a lot more points than they'll lose points, right, at the tables. So the games get played, across these 8 tables, and the point value that gets entered for the event for whatever that player did is a point differential, and you can find all of this at AoSWorld.com. We have all the rules pack posted there, and you'll see the charts breaking down the differentials. But basically, it's like you win by 1 point, it's like it's on a 20-point scale, so I believe it's 11-9. So you win by 11, and your opponent. So I know that's a tie of superior, more battle tactics than your opponent's 11-9, and if it's a win by one, it's 12-2 or something, right? Those things. And then like if you have a blowout win, like to get a 20-0 in the format, you have to basically, I believe, and I'll double check myself, but it has to be such a big win that it's a blowout. And the only way this can be done in terms of a blowout is by having a superior pairing versus a superior on a good mission, right? Like those two combinations of things have to be so apparent, because that's the differentials are that it defines yeah, a 17-point differential is a 20-0, meaning that your opponent has scored, you have a 17 plus point lead on your opponent. In the current format, when you think about it, on average missions are 5 points around, so you have to effectively outscore your opponent for more than 3 turns, like scored, and then them scoring 0 points and then getting your grand strat. that's that's a blowout. Like that is not even close. Traditionally, the range of points you'll see, like if you should see, like outside of like if you minimize the pairing or minimize the mission it's on, then most wins should float around like 13 to 17 points, because the 13 points is it's a 1-turn lead or a grand strat lead, and a 15-point win is a turn and a grand strat lead, and 17 points is 2 turns and a grand strat lead. What that means is that even that at 17, it's kind of like it's pretty much a blowout, but like 20-0 it's so uncommon it shouldn't happen. And the reason why I say it this way, it's because you kind of control the pairing elements, and most players when you play into a GT format, you don't really necessarily care about the point win unless it's a GT that decides ranking based on battle points. You want to get the win. So winning by 1 point is just as good as winning by whatever 15, 20, 30 points, because it gets you in the next bracket, it gets you in the next game, and it's all about being undefeated. In this format, because the team as a collective is trying to get as many points as possible while denying the opposing team as many points as possible, you can still have, and I'll give you some examples of this, you can still have incredibly bad matchups and incredibly bad pairings, but if you're playing to the outs that are given to you, or you're trying to minimize the losses, you can still keep it to a very small point differential. We had one game, I'll give a recap, but we have more than one game. But we had one game where we thought on paper we were gonna get a 20-0 like loss because it was going so badly. We knew the pairing was not great. The mission was okay, but we knew the pairing wasn't great. And then our player kept winning some crucial prios in the second half, and the game landed up a 13-7, a loss for us, which is insane because we thought we were going to get a like 18 plus, 18-2 to a 20-0. But that's like that skill at that game and the way you're playing, it's no longer necessarily just about like, swinging for the fences or just winning. It's also about, basically minimizing the loss as much as possible. So, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because I'm trying to bring up the website. Is this it? Yes, this is it. So, what does that mean in total, right? So you have all these teams. All your players are recording their games, and you're getting points as the progression of things. So when you look at Denmark, like 83 points. I should one more step. I'm sorry, I forgot to explain one more step. So the couch is recording all these points. There is a cap of points a team can get. It's 120. But the actual math is 160 because the middle point is 80. Meaning if you have 4 wins of 20-0s, and that means you get 80 points. But you have 4 losses at 20-0s, and it's 80 for your opponent. So you can think like 80 as like the baseline of, the threshold between a win and a loss, right? So when you look at Denmark's score, they started with 83 first round. That was against England. So they won by 3 points. That's a very tight round, right? 80's that barometer. Then they played against us, Team USA. They lost 76 to 84 for us because it's always going to be a differential of 160, right? So it always adds up to 160. Unless, of course, it's yeah, always, it is. Doesn't matter. So, very tight round as well, right? And then next round they play, I forgot who they played that round. I'm sorry, Denmark, and your opponent, but they got 120. A 120 in this format should be so rare that like it like it shouldn't happen, right? There's got to be some combination of pairing, player skill expression, difference, mission, and then plus like luck to get at 120. It should be incredibly hard, right? So like one of the things like we noticed this year versus last year, and this is a comment for the whole event, as the years have been progresses, there's been so much less occurrences of a max point win round, and that's because people are starting to get better at the pairing situation and the pairing logic. So it's been reducing, and also the prep for the event. So it's been reducing these big margin wins. So really, the only thing left at the table to define like that kind of wins, it's assuming pairings went. Every team I think is going to tell you the pairings went well, at least at face value. Maybe after the pairings they disagree, but I don't. It's not to say like some team is better than pairing another, but I think that's probably true. They do think pairings went well for both sides, but then the result says otherwise. So if you assume you believe them, the pairings went well for both teams. The only way they can get this many points is because player skill was so different at the table in these matchups. If you have players which are just so much better than their opponent, even though they might be favorable in the matchup, they can still win and scrape it a bunch of points. But then the pairings which are in your favor in that round, and the player skill is already differential than 20-0. And Ruin, don't take that badly. I know you got 20-0 by Beasley in that round, but I'm not accusing you of being bad. There is the other element of the game that is incredibly important, is pryos. And I think this GHB versus I think some of the previous GHBs have made some pryos more important than others. And that's not saying the GHB itself, but it's just the edition has gone. We're at the end of the edition now. There's been so much rules bloat over the years. There's been so much more efficiency found into armies that in some cases, like, we're looking at like, hey, turn it, in some case, you can shove an army in there and you win turn 2 prio and you get a double, you fucking table your opponent or borderline cripple them. And you could say like, well, that's been true for AoS for a long time, Jeremy. Like, it has really not been that true for a long time for AoS. This is like a more recent phenomenon. And I think with the changes to 4th edition, he'll weigh that down a little bit more. This edition, I'll talk about it when I look back at the game. It's definitely felt in this GHB that there has been a lot more of this kind of like kind of swing for the fences and getting rewarded for it is more than getting punished. But the breakdown of these points is you can see like kind of like the spread across all the teams. And this is the first AoS World where there was no undefeated team. This is the first one ever. So that says something about the overall format, right? It says that the teams have stepped up their game a lot. Now, I'm going to say, because I'm American, it's because there's been more Americans playing this year than any other year. So go USA. So I think we had like 13 US players at the event. So we had a lot of other US players across other teams. That's not just the US one. I'm sure everybody will dislike that comment. But no, it's important like that. Like, no team was undefeated. It was truly a grind for, the position in the state, right? So now I kind of explain the format and everything. Let's just focus on like my experience at 2024. So this is the first year where I was not involved with being the commissioner or being the captain of the team or even playing. So I've kind of done the gambit of all that kind of like the kind of active role positions across the team. I took more this year, like I was a reserve player for the team. I did not have to play. I helped also the coaching staff a bit. Water boy was my other function. I also did a bunch of recording for day 1 and day 2 for our Twitter channel and made updates, kept the community for the Team America Twitter, kept the community around. But fundamentally, I was just watching games. and I thought it would be more relaxing. Turns out that watching games is way more stressful than actually playing a game. And I think like when I've probably people at the event probably heard me say this a lot. I can only lose 6 games at the event, right? But because I'm only going to play 6 games. But I'm watching when you're watching everybody else games, I can lose 18 times. I can lose 20 times. It's so grueling to watch games and just watching things just go haywire for my team like consistently. Or because that's the parts I'm going to fixate on as a person, and maybe I think everybody does that. There's clearly good things that happen as well for the team, right? We beat Denmark. We're the only team that beat Denmark in like 3 years, and last year we gave them their smallest point win. Like we are like I think we've kind of honed in of how we want to play AoS Worlds. The problem is, and you'll notice, is that we ended up 11th here. All right, we had an 84-point win, an 84-point win, an 89-point win, a 79-point loss. That's a 1-point loss, a 93-point win, and then a 73-point loss. That's a 7-point loss. I'm sure Thomo or Gareth will do the math, but I'm pretty sure we had the least variance in score of any team from the mean, like from the 80-point line. And that's I think that's reflective of our overall approach to the event. We brought we were probably the second most hipster different like composition for the event, and it was by design. Like this was active decisions that we made to bring this comp to the event, and I think it worked out for us pretty well in the sense that like we didn't lose big and we didn't win big, but the win big it comes with a lot more asterisk than the lose big asterisk comment. I, and this is like I'm gonna now go into like more of like the salty bitchy version of myself, but full dwarf mode. I got to watch round was it against Greece? Was it round 4? Was the round that we were playing on stream, and though we only had 4 of the 8 games on stream, and we were like, if you looked at the tables off the stream, we did fantastic at those. Like, we actually started getting like high point wins. I think it was like the first round we started getting high point wins. What's been happening in like the previous rounds is that we were winning, but the lists that were designed to get kind of like you can think of as like our grinder armies, we're grinding to where they're targeting like 13-7, 14-6 scores. They're nailing this. But the teams that were basically supposed to get like in the pairings like potentially 18-point wins were not getting it. And it just came down once again to something I said earlier. Not winning the prios and like to basically get a double to finish off your opponent to prevent them from scoring points. Or in some cases, it's impossible to prevent their grand strat at that point. It's just like you can't get that point differential, and thus like you can't materialize. You're getting these wins, but this is gonna be 15-5. It's gonna be small point wins. And then we had some big losses. I'm gonna say that my boy Anthony had the roughest weekend of any Team America members that I've been a part watch of. He's been thrown under the bus 6 times, and both times he had a chance to basically swat the bus away with a giant Kragnos mace, and only if he could win a turn 3 prio. Didn't happen. I think he's batting like fuck. Like, you think he's won 2 prios all weekend or something. Yeah, like we knew the game for him were gonna be rough, and we were like, but the thing is, like, so many of his opponents got into this kind of situation where like he can win like a double, and he can just kind of swing the game, like completely blow it open. That's kind of like the upside of that list, where like it's gonna grind it out. It's probably gonna lose small potentially, and sometimes maybe lose big. But like, and because we were wanted people to attack with something that we didn't really want to face somewhere else, and then take the gamble for a small point loss, that could open up to a bigger point loss. But then he still had like gas for like these big, massive swing potentials. If he could just win the prize when it mattered. Yeah, so good job, Anthony. No, he was a rock star. I can't. I was more stressed out and angry about the results from his games than he was, and that's not saying he wasn't. I just was, my personality doesn't let me do it, and all that kind of like, just like fucking shit luck that he had very well. Anyway, so for the most part, like you can kind of understand that like we went with the goal of having four, additionally one loss, potentially two, and then three, minor to bigger win, and then the last would be like kind of like swing for the fences results, and it just didn't materialize. But the nice thing was that like we didn't think any of our opposition really quite figured out how to pair correctly. I think we've been doing this for 2 years running. And that's just basically taking one or two armies that like our opposition has been like having a hard time interacting with or underestimating. I think this year was Jacob's Cruel Boys. I think every team probably walked away thinking that they can just like 20-0 that army, and then they walked into it and they died. It's like, I think that's what ended up happening, and he's for poor Philip from Warmer Players from Russia. I think there was also the Corn player from Germany who that it basically happened to him as well. But then he had a very lucky streak of sequence of events on the last turn, and like this is exactly what we wanted for Anthony. Had insane leaks like luck street and just completely blow open the game. And for context, like Jacob has basically tabled this corn opponent. He has one Bloodthirster yet left, and like I think 10 bloodletters that he summoned. And it's a Boom Thirster. Boom Thirster goes in, doesn't boom, but takes a Bold Boys unit down to like one model. Bold Boy unit passes a Battle Shock on a 1. Like literally, I think it was like the only result he could pass on. And then Jacob wins Prio, takes Prio. Boom Thirster fights in the hero phase. Rolls against the single lone bolt thrower, rolls 2 6s, booms 8 mortal wounds to almost like Jacob's entire army, which prevents Jacob's grand strat, all these things, and then Jacob goes in with Swordjerker to survive the boom, and with some beast killers, needs to roll 2+ on the beast killers to make the Bloodthirster strike last, fails with 2 up, Boom Thirster goes in again, booms again, and everything dies. And that's literally like we went from in that scenario we were looking at like an 16+ win, and then also didn't turn into a loss just from that like 3 sequence. But I'll talk one more time if you let me spare time spare time for my moments of stress. I literally like I had a cry after the game against Greece, and I needed it. It's not like something like it's not something like I'm ashamed of. It's just that it was like I can't imagine like a worse sequence of event for the team ever. And it's great, it's great for Greece because I'm sure they're gonna love telling this story like for years. And this is one of the things I love about this format. It's like these moments are so like narrative driven, and people will talk about them for years. But for those who don't know, and you can watch this, it was mostly covered on the stream for Honest Wargame. I think he pretty much alluded to everything, but I got to watch it all happen. This is all within like 15 minutes, right? Beasley needs to make like a 5-inch charge to kind of like solidify not a major win or anything, but like it would be turning into a minor win. And he worked for it. Like his opponent was like giving him the reach around, like the round, and it was bad. But he fucking worked, like, and he was scraping, and he did incredibly well. But he needs to make this 5 last charge to stop his opponent's grand strat, so he can win by I think like 1 point. So he failed. This is with a Lord of Change. So the thing only had like 1 or 2 wounds left. He only needed to like stomp and then like swing into him, and potentially, like most likely was going to kill him. Lord of Change fails his 5-inch charge. He has no Destiny dice to spend because he needs it for his grand strat. Goes for the reroll, It actually doesn't even need a 5, right? I think he needed like a 4 or something. He just, the thing was 5 inches away, and there was more clan rats in front. He fails to charge, re-rolls Snake Eyes. Cool. Next table over. Jacob lost an important lost an important double that would have allowed him to just kind of like basically put the nail in his opponent's army like around turn 3, and allowed his opponent, this is on towers, with his last big unit of Vanguard to like push through and like effectively like completely wipe, fold one of Jacob's flank. But the other flank Jacob completely crushed. So, and those Vanguards were kind of out of the game at that point. He just needs to make that Cruel Boys unit of like his big size one, like he has 2 options. If he makes this 5-inch charge with plus 1 inch to charge because of Boggy Mist or whatever the spell is called, he stops his opponent from getting his tower points, and all of a sudden now I think he wins by 1. But if he makes a slightly longer, actually the charge was like 4 or 5 inches, I forgot, but it was around that same as well. It's pretty close, and I think you can see it briefly on stream. If he makes a big charge out of it, he can actually bring enough bodies onto the other points of towers with pylons, because his opponent couldn't block him often doing that, and he would have gone the tower points, plus he would have taken the objective back, which would have allowed him to take control and get like, even like now he would have been looking at maybe a 2 to 3 point, a 13 or to a 15 point win. He fucking goes for roll, fails, re-rolls, double ones again. Okay, great, awesome. Then on the game next to him, Gavin, who's at to scrape for against IDK Sharklist, and was like basically winning, or doing not winning, but like keeping it within tight. Just needs this unit of 30 thralls to get below. He just needs to do 26 damage to this unit of thralls, 30 thralls, to take to score 1-2 more, and then it would also basically give him enough points to win by a small point win as well. His opponent took all of the hard render attacks, took all of them. I think lost like 18 models, I want to say. Then he lost 3 more to the wig, the bites. But then Gavin forgot to roar. Stress, fatigue gets there. And it's still a 3 or more. He could have failed it. But his opponent made 1 6-up save on the tail attack, which would have been a flat 6 damage. And had he failed that, he would have lost a point, and then Gavin won by 1, right? We're talking like I said, like all of this, these are all individual dice rolls happening like within 10-15 minutes of each other. And there was another game that round that we lost on stream that we lost to, and I'm like scraping my mind right now. I completely forgot. Let me check. The pairings. Yeah, because like we had one more round, one more game on stream that like had another like singular event that lost us the game. It's not USA. It's not United States. America, is that what we put it under? Yeah, Team America. Perfect. Gammon, man, already covered. Oh yeah, it was Noah. He actually his was always going to be a loss, I think, but he had the opportunity to keep it like super small, and by making this like 3-inch charge on a point, but he lost as well. So that one was yeah, it was just like I think in the comedy of events of just all of these like singular charge failures and very limited rolls, it was just pretty bad. But you would have flipped the script on like the point output or the point scoring in terms of the other 3 games resolving, and we would have won that round by like not by much, but like maybe like upwards of 80-90, which still would have kept us like in the at that point we would have been one of the few undefeated team, and kept us going. It's not like the extra points necessarily would have helped us to get too close to the podium. You're in the other there, but it's like it's so crushing to have moments like this. And the reason I bring it up like that is because that kind of mental fortitude you need to get past that moment and bunker down and like just refocus. Don't think about it. Don't play as if it's going to repeat itself. Get back to the table and push. Like, is important in the players that show up to these. You cannot have a weak mental mental fortitude for moments like this. And in that regard, like it's a big ask for some players can't handle that kind of, like, think about like a GT player that's very good, but has really only rarely ever lost, right? And you're basically telling him you're going to play in the most one-sided game on the planet potentially, and your openings for outs are almost non-existent. So you know they can get frustrated in the game about that reality, and they can start making bigger blunders. And in that case, they're like, them losing doesn't matter because the end score doesn't matter. But in the grand spectrum of this team event, it matters. Like, you can, you could know this game's already kind of not you're going your way based on the pairing and round, and then you lose turn 2 prio, then you lose turn 3 prio, then you lose turn 4 prio, and then at every of those moments you're like, I can't let that decide. I can't make mistakes. I can't afford to make mistakes. I need to keep those points tight. And this is what happened multiple times over the weekend, right? Across all of the teams, right? So in that regard, like, our comp never really got us these major wins that we needed to be as competitive as some of the other teams on the scoreboard. But in terms of like play and what it did, it's effective. It did what we wanted, which is we're hoping we're going to get maybe a couple more 20-0s or 18-2s than we actually got, right? And that's just unfortunate. You can't really control these types of like situations that well. And I say that like, that there's some teams out there who got like these 120s and 100 plus victories, but they're also, their comp is very different. They had a big amount, like we had some teams with like literally go for, swing for the fences comps with these like triple, double boom thirster list. But you kind of have to baby that in certain matchups, or you don't have to, and you just say, fuck it, win turn 2 prio, and just like maybe like you'll just roll enough 6s to get power through whatever. And that's not a school of thought that we adopted for our composition. We were more interested in winning the games. Well, firstly, winning all of our games potentially, but not necessarily by a lot of points. That's what we were gunning for. We wanted as minimum losses and all wins. And I think we did the math like right now to like where Team Denmark finished. If every player averaged out 12.8 points, I think, which is a 2-point win per round, you would beat Denmark right now in this format, right? Now, as the only team who's done it in 3 years, I can tell you that's no easy feat. That's so good luck to you guys. But you get kind of like the justification and the strategy behind it. I do. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about like Team America outside of like the results. Now I don't have any like personal or insider information of what's going to happen for next year. I'm sure that will be made public soonish by the kind of the Team America admin staff. But for the most part, like we've always been a team that's striving for inclusivity, not in diversity and equal and like whatever, but like in the sense that like we have a lot of players that want to do this event and that can do this event, right? And we want to give them as much opportunities to be on the team as possible, which is why I think on an average, we've brought 3 to 4 new players every year for the last 4 years. And every one of them have said physically that they would want to come back. Like even like this year, we had Emma playing for Serbia. We had Marcella playing for Team UN. What else? I think we had one more ex-veteran also playing for another team this year. Like we had quite a few American players this year playing at Worlds. We're not on Team America. And that brings a joy to my heart because we've always been we've always tried to, like, we would love to have more slots to bring more Americans to this event. So, I mean, if I got to do anything this year, it's to just try to push for, the ability to bring two Team Americas. Like, it's not like those teams this year that need the Mercs won't have them available. There are still more Americans that want to come do this. Like, we're probably the largest gaming community in the world, in terms of this game, and just that it's not about like getting an unfair advantage for against other countries by having multiple teams. It's just that we want to make sure as many of we open this as an opportunity for everybody that wants to, able to do it. Now, that doesn't mean like we're going to open it to every player as a team. Even if we get the more slots, you still have to go through like the program and the qualifications and so forth, right? There are some players we've had to turn away because of just attitude or unable to deal with the stress of the game format and not handling it, and just seeing them fold at the pressure and then consistently making bad table decisions that cost them points at the table, and so forth, right? There's a part of us that's never going to change that. We want to make sure that whoever we show up to represent America is always going to be, we, and I say I, but at the end of the day, I think that's true for the entire team. Like, that is the best we can represent, both game style, game wise, and personality wise. We want to win best sportsman as much as we want to win number one spot, right? And I like to say, this year Poland won, I think, best sportsman. But that's only because they had eagles on their jerseys, and what the fuck, we forgot to put eagles on our jerseys. If only we had put eagles on our jerseys. So, fuck us, I guess. We put stars, No, I'm kidding. I'm sure they were. We didn't have any bad rounds at all. Like, we've never had like incredibly bad rounds at AoS Worlds. There's maybe like as a collective team setting, I'm sure some of us have maybe had one or two players we were like, it's on the border, but nothing that problematic. Which boils down to like the conversation I've seen prop on Twitter the last few days, which around the type of game that's happening at Worlds is not conducive to fun and fair play in a sense. Like, I think the conversation, I'm not gonna try not to throw you under the bus here, Dan, because I think you're the one who posted the thing on Twitter. I just don't agree with the logic of the argument. Like, yes, it can feel a little bit gotcha that like you're basically been told like you can't do this thing because the rule said you had to declare it earlier in the game, and your opponent is telling you like, well, you're too far now and you forgot, I'm not letting you have it. That's like, you're not playing in your local like hole in the wall RTT GT. You're playing it like Worlds. Like, this is supposed to be the format in which people don't make these kinds of execution mistakes. And even if you do, just that rise in the, we've made those mistakes. We've gotten caught, and we were not like, we were sure in the moment we're like, well, this fucking sucks. But then it's like, well, rise above, like, push forward. It's like, I mean, like, I'll be honest, like, I think, and I'm not going to put him out there on the recording, but like the team, I think Dan was complaining about, we've played them for 4 years running, and we've never had an issue with them. And I think that, that says something, hopefully, to the audience out there. And also to Dan. I don't know, like, how to fix your quandary, but it's Worlds. It's not your local GT. It's not your local RTT. It's supposed to be a game where your execution is flawless. And if you are like maybe in an environment where you think that's like too, or you think that's too harsh, like, also like it's, I don't know what else you guys describe it. This is by rules and definition supposed to be the premier competitive AoS event. What do you want? People to play with backsies and mulligans the entire tournament? Mulligans and backsies are problematic in the sense that, like, I love giving them people mulligans and backsies, especially when it's like minor things and like, or if they remember it within like maybe like immediately after the roll within the same sequence. Like, I'm totally fine with that. But that's me. And if I expect my opponent to do the same thing, it's unfair to my opponent, because at no point do we have a social contract that says he gets to do that. Maybe if you want to do that, you should talk to your opponent even at Worlds, like, hey, this is how we're going to play. And we've done that, we do that pretty consistently with our opponents, and they're totally chill, like whatever we've described. Like we set the ground rule for social interaction, and they're fine with it because we want to make sure we're all playing the same way. But sometimes I also think that, like, and this is not a jab at people, and specifically, I'm not calling anybody here, but like, there's some teams that have a repetition of wanting to play fair and doing these mulligans back Tixies, but when it's like, game impacting event for the opposition, they will change mode, right? They will switch mode. And I've seen it happen at certain, like in certain games. I won't call it, it's not specifically like teams, it's certain games, and it fucking sucks, okay? It sucks. But mulligans by design are not fair. They are not a fair way of representation fixing mistakes. What is the best way of fixing mistakes is to play the game cleanly as possible and not having mulligans in the first place. That is literally the definition of fair play. Anything else is just a definition of like you're just being probably a good person or a good human. But that doesn't mean because your opponent doesn't want to let you do mulligans, it's a bad person. Like, like I whatever happened to your opponents or your players that felt like a gotcha, I'm sorry, but like as Warhammer players, this is something we fear and this is something we try to shy away. But I don't think in this case it was, you can argue for gotchas because this is the one event where you're supposed to be so prepped. There will be no gotchas. You should see our, binder that Gavin made for every player, for every one of their opponents. They with like breakdowns of everything their opponent's army can do and all the things you have to watch out for and all the things you have to remember doing. Like, this is AoS reminder on crack level, because Gavin is, in a sense, the most meticulous person I know, especially when it comes to this game. So like if you are not willing to do that level of game at Worlds, then do not complain when you make these execution mistakes. It will happen. And then if it does happen, get over it, move on, focus, play the game. And I'm sure that's what ended up happening. I don't think anybody of these players were like, well, that's fine. I refuse to play. You have to win. I quit. Like, I don't think you could do that at a GT, and it's like whatever, right? But in this one, I don't fucking do that. So, play the game, get the points. Like, I don't know. That debate for me was just it's just gonna open up a can of worms because mulligans are a social contract that like can be very one-sided. And that's just unfair for both sides. Now, expecting both sides to know their rules is not really like that's kind of like the minimal thresholds of playing the game. Now, being so anal retentive to expect them to remember in the exact sequence of operation, yeah, you could argue that's being a little bit of anal retentive, but we're also playing in this stage, and this format requires you to know all your rules and their sequence and when they happen. So anyway, I don't want to focus too much on that. I want to talk about a little bit about next year, what I think Team America is going to do for next year. 4th edition's around the corner. I'm hoping that like the game, we'll see how the AoS World Pack, evolves with 4th edition because it has to. I think it has to, not because of the mission changes or the armies. It's just I think 4th edition by design is a much more tight game in terms of point setting. We'll see how it materialize because we don't have any grand strats. Battle tactics now are, less likely. You're less likely to see doubles because you lose potentially, 4 points to score per round if you do that, and that could be very costly in the long run for a tournament series that uses differentials. So also, if you have no real doubles, then the games are going to be like you go, I go, I score more, I score my primaries, you score your secondaries, and then maybe sometimes 1 or 2 secondaries doesn't get scored. But we'll see. Like, I think the differentials are going to be a little tighter. Like taking a double, and I mean, to be honest, like I say that, but we saw some lists this year where we just shove and take a double early to just basically prevent your opponent from scoring. Is that a way to turn a matchup that you think you're going to lose into potentially a win by sacrificing 4 points? Yeah, probably. But I think by design, I think that if you look at our placings, writing that 80 point up or down curve or like line threshold, it's probably the same for fourth edition. I think the point wins are going to be much smaller on average. So I mean, it's still the responsibility of the teams to find ways to, generate and create these scenarios in which the points are much higher, right? So anyway, this has now been roughly almost an hour of me talking about Worlds. Oh, right, I want to talk about what Team America wants to do for 2025. I'm hoping we still allow, I'm going to try to push for another team gets created so we can take 16 players. I'm sure it'll be shut down because it's up to the community captain, the team captains to vote on that. But I think it's like at this point, like if this rate, like we're just gonna keep invading. Well, probably not the right term here. Invading other countries' as rosters with Americans. So anyway, and hopefully maybe next year we'll have like that way we'll get to like 30 team number, and that'd be swell. Okay, guys. As I am needing one more coffee in me because this jet lag is kicking my ass. I'll see you around, and thanks for watching, and thanks to listen to my rant and my positive things and whatever, and we'll see you online.